Good evening. We have a very social group this evening. I'm going to ask you all to come to order, find your seats, come to order, and would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone, to the Wednesday, July 15th meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. I am Julie Pierce, the chair of the authority. And the first item on our agenda this evening is public comment. And I do have a speaker card for Mr. Ralph Huffman. Welcome, Ralph.
Good evening, Chair Julie and members of the board. I'm here tonight to talk about a different way our streets in this county and around the country are being used. And I'm wearing my comment, actually, because yesterday was the law enforcement torch run, the last leg, I should say, of it, where it started, I believe, this last leg in Danville and then came up to Walnut Creek. In fact, our mayor of Walnut Creek had a little ceremony with our chief of police in Civic Park, and then it came up to Pleasant Hill City Hall, and then I believe the participants rode by bus down to, or will be riding by bus down to L.A. where the Olympics are held. Now, what kind of Olympics are these? These are Olympics for mentally disabled people, and that doesn't necessarily mental illness, any kind of mental disability, but it kind of teaches them that they can accomplish something too physically and stay in shape and even win some prizes because of their abilities to run. So it's if I'd ask you contribute to this organization because it really helps. This is a worldwide organization like the Olympics are. I think there are some 92 countries that participate in this now. That's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak under public comment this evening? Seeing no one else come forward, I will close the public comment period. I do want to indicate for the record that we have a quorum this evening with all members present, with the exception of Newell Arnrich, and Ron Leon is sitting in for David Durant. We are also honored to have our ex officio members, Gail Murray representing BART and Chris Peoples representing the bus companies. So welcome everyone again. That makes us official. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the June 17th meeting. Any additions, corrections, or a motion?
Move approval. Second.
Motion by Tatson, second by Romick. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? That carries unanimously by those present. Thank you. The next item is the consent calendar. You do have a updated resolution in your packet on the DS for item 9.3, minor corrections, doesn't affect the outcome of the item. Anyone want to pull any of the items for separate discussion, or do we have a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Motion by Tatson, second by Hudson. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain. That carries unanimously by those present. Thank you all very much. We are moving along very expeditiously. We are now to our first major discussion item. You didn't think it was going to get here that fast, did you? Which is an update from BART. And I'm going to throw this over to our ex officio representative of BART, to Gail Murray. Gail, may you make this introduction, please?
Yes, thank you. We have here tonight Carter Mao, who's the Assistant General Manager for Administration and Budget at BART. We know that in discussing the TEP, the RTPCs have focused a lot on their local issues, and it didn't seem like there was an appropriate slot for BART in those discussions because it's a regional agency that affects all of the RTPCs. So in discussions with staff, we thought that it might be good to give you a very short presentation from BART as kind of the regional position that we represent and our needs. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Carter.
Hey, Carter, just for the record, everyone, you have a handout on the dais with these slides in case you have trouble reading further away. Thank you, Carter.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. All right. Can you all hear me?
Wait,
All
just
right.
as a point of order, that you said there were handouts that are this, where? It's on the back of them? Okay.
Is it not included in your packet? No. Oh, so it looks like this half of the room has the handouts.
Sorry about that confusion. All right. Everybody has one that needs one. You got it. Good. Thank you, Carter. No more disruption. You
Are we
may
all set
take
to go now?
over.
All right. So again, it's a pleasure to be here this evening. Nice to see some familiar faces at the dais, including your executive director, who I met over 25 years ago when I first got out of college, and he. So our careers have followed each other around a lot, and it's good to be here. All right, so I'm here to provide you with a very high-level overview of BART's capital needs. Those are our capital projects, what we have funding for over the next 10 years, and what other items that we have that are unfunded, and our efforts to try to meet those funding needs and to fill that funding gap. All right, now I'm trying to figure this one out. Oop. All right. So I trust that we can all acknowledge that BART is a very critical service in Contra Costa County, and it improves the mobility and quality of life here. Just a few factoids about BART in Contra Costa County to start off with. The service that runs from Pittsburgh Bay Point to the airport is the busiest line in our system. About 26% of all BART trips in our system begin or end in Contra Costa County. And what's really fascinating is the average trip length those people take when they get on or off of BART. The average trip length on a BART ride for the whole system is about 14 miles per trip. For Contra Costa County riders, it's about 30 miles per trip. That means a lot of vehicle miles traveled saved, a lot of greenhouse gas emissions saved by those people in Contra Costa County riding BART. I also asked staff to take a look at, so how do we compare to the highway corridor? During the peak hour, BART actually carries more people on the BART train than the number of vehicles that cross through the Caldecott Tunnel in the westbound direction in the peak hour in the AM. A lot of congestion would occur on the Highway 24 corridor if the BART system were not running. All right. So, but what I'm really here to talk about today is BART's capital needs. BART has been focusing on asset management over the last 4 or 5 years. We're trying to figure out what our assets are, what condition they're in, what improvements need to make, and what that's going to cost. For those of you who are, managers in cities, elected officials in cities, the Pavement Condition Index, the PCI, is something that you're all familiar with. Well, we're trying to get that same information for all the assets in our system. Our current estimate to replace all of our assets in the BART system is about $30 billion. But we've taken a smaller slice of that, and over the next 10 years, we see the total need at about $9.6 billion. Over the next 10 years, we think we have potential funding sources, identified funding sources for about half of those capital needs. So we have about $4.8 billion. I'll go over those needs and that funding on the next couple of slides. But that leaves us with a shortfall of about $4.8 billion. And that's what we all have to work cooperatively on, or collaboratively on, to try to solve. I'll talk a little bit about what BART's trying to do, what we're trying to do with the region, what we're trying to do with the federal government, but we're going to ask for your assistance as well. So about 75% of that $9.6 billion need is simply reinvesting in the system that we have out there today. It's replacing the rail cars, it's replacing the track, it's replacing the train control system. It's system reinvestment. This is not capacity, this is not expansion, this is trying to fix what's in place today. Much of our infrastructure, as you probably all heard, is now 40 years old, and much of it needs to replace. It's reached the end of its useful life. And just like infrastructure in cities, infrastructures in the state, we are far behind in the replacement needs, and we think about 75% of that $9.6 billion is just replacing what we have in today. About 18% of that $9.6 billion is for additional capacity and service. As you all know, BART's ridership is growing and growing very quickly. We just broke, and with the closing of the last fiscal year, we broke our all-time record for average weekday ridership, carrying over 430,000 passengers a day. That's about a 5% growth over the previous year, and we had the same amount of growth, the previous years before that. The growth on BART has just been more than anyone anticipated, and you see the evidence of that when you ride the system every day. The trains are packed, and it's becoming very much of a challenge. The biggest investments in our capital program, if I had to pick three of them, they are the new rail cars that we are in the process of acquiring. It's a new train control system. This is the system that controls, the movement of the trains, make sure that they remain safely at a good distance apart. And then we have to also invest in what's called the Hayward Maintenance Complex. The HMC is a new revamped maintenance complex in the city of Hayward. We do have a maintenance complex there, but it's not big enough to accommodate the cars we have now and also the cars that we'll be bringing online in the next few years. So we're revamping that, making it more efficient, making it more up to date. On this page, you see where we think some of this funding that I mentioned in that pie chart would be coming from. The biggest source will continue to be the federal government. There are formula programs that still come from the federal government, and we think we'll get about $2.2 billion of that of the funding from those sources. Much of it is administered through the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. The second biggest source of funding that we have to meet some of these needs is actually from BART's operating budget. When I say BART's operating revenues, I mean things like the fares people pay, the sales taxes that we collect as part of the three counties that we operate in, and also some of the property taxes that the residents pay in these three counties. We, over the last 10 years, I've done this calculation, have put over $500 million in our own operating funds, fares, sales tax, property tax, into capital projects. We're not using it for the operations of the system. We're using it to replace some of these capital needs out there. But it hasn't been enough, and we really need to ramp that up over the next few years, or the reliability of the service is going to get it's going to be challenging. There's no doubt about that. You might ask, where's the money from the county sales tax for eBART? That is actually in that little asterisk there, about $300 million of previous committed funds. That's the Measure J money that went for eBART is part of that asterisk. So it's not part of the $4.8 billion of funding identified. So given that financial scenario of $9.6 billion in needs and only $4.8 billion of funding, this is a potential scenario of what BART's financial outlook looks like for our capital program. You can see we have enough funding for the 775 rail cars. That is basically replacing the rail cars we have and also purchasing some new rail cars totally paid for by VTA for the Valley Transportation Authority for the extension going down to San Jose. We have about half the money we need for system reinvestment. You can see the red bar up there. We have a very much unfunded need in our current scenario for basically just the nuts and bolts of the system. We have very little money for capacity expansion. How are we going to, carry all these additional riders that are clamoring to use the system, and that MTC's regional transportation plan calls for even more growth around the BART stations. You can see the new rail cars, we only have enough for about 775 or 800 of the rail cars we would like to have. The 306 rail car item you see there is mostly unfunded. And if we want to run more service, if we want to run longer trains, we need more than just replacing the cars. We need additional cars on top of that. So the scenario you see before you is going to make it very challenging to keep the existing service we have running out there reliably and on time and up to the levels that we would like to provide for the region. With that very big unfunded need in our system reinvestment category, it will almost certainly get worse out there in the system if we don't, as a region, do something about this. Here's a few pictures of the challenges that we are facing. But the bottom line is that we have an aging infrastructure combined with increasing demand and increasing ridership. BART truly is under stress, and it's going to be important for everyone to work together to keep the system running reliably. You would note the picture on the upper right is just a couple weeks ago when we had the service outage. Those are the people that had to get off in Lafayette and try to find their way home after we couldn't run any further. And you know the challenges that we had and the bus systems had with trying to carry all those people who got stuck in Lafayette home. Unfortunately, those are the type of things that might happen more if we don't reinvest in the system that we have out there today. So what are we going to do about this? You probably all heard about BART's thinking, BART's board of directors considering floating a bond measure in the BART counties in fiscal year in 2016. That is not a done deal yet, but the conversations are being had, and the BART board will have to make a decision sometime later this year. At this point, it looks like we are going to focus, if we go forward with this bond measure, on what we call a fix-it-first agenda. That is basically upgrading and replacing the systems we have in place. That's the train control system, that's our traction power system, that's our tracks, that's our structures. Unfortunately, rail cars are not eligible for a GEO-bond program. GEO-bond programs are only good for fixed assets, even though rail cars with the car wheel spacing that we have probably can't be used anywhere else in the system. They are not considered fixed assets because they could be taken somewhere else. So we have to focus it on things like train control, traction power system, stations, elevator, escalators. And based on the chart you saw previously, we have more than enough needs to fill that $3 billion bond measure. So what do we do for the other $1.8 billion shortfall that we are still facing? That leaves us with looking for other sources of money besides the bond measure. We are trying to get more money from the federal government. For you, those familiar with it, basically there was a federal program called the New Starts program that would often pay for extensions of rail lines in various parts of the countries that were brand new. The federal government has now said some of that money we're going to make available for what they call making capacity improvements or core capacity improvements with the existing systems. So we are, working with MTC to try to bring some of that money back to the region and pay for some of our improvements that are needed to increase the capacity and the carrying capacity of our system. We are working with the state to bring more cap and trade money into the region, and BART competes very well for that. But it's only going to be a very competitive source of money. But we are going to try to get some more there. We have talked to MTC. We have encouraged MTC to maybe look at doing something with bridge toll revenues, and BART could compete for some of that money. And we are actively working with the 3 counties that BART operates in to see if they can do something with their sales tax measures and other local sources. San Francisco is looking at vehicle license fees, developer fees, looking at a sales tax program. In 2018, we're actively working with them to try to secure some money for BART from that. We worked with Alameda County on the reauthorization of their measure BB, and we have some money identified for BART in that program. Unfortunately, it's not all for Fix It First. Some of it goes for other items that will not address some of the capital needs that I laid out for you on the program. And the reason we're here tonight is we want to work collaboratively with Contra Costa County to see if we can get some of the BART needs that will improve service and reliability in Contra Costa funded. And we would like to work collaboratively with you on our bond measure. And I know you guys are talking about the reauthorization of your sales tax here. What would Contra Costa County get out of a fully funded capital program for BART? As I mentioned, right now, only the first 775 cars are paid for. We would like to find some funding to get that up to over 1,000 cars. And also, we would like to use some of the bond money to put in the new train control system. So what does that mean? That means more service and longer trains in Contra Costa County. You are the busiest line now from Pittsburgh Bay Point to San Francisco. You get the most service right now, and it's still crowded. With a new train control system and more cars during the peak period, we can get those we can get all those trains to 10 cars in length, and instead of every 5 to 6 minutes, we can get them down to every 4 minutes. That's a significant improvement for that line for going from Pittsburgh Bay Point to the city. On the Richmond line, we would be able to reduce those headways to 5 minutes during the peak period. And many of those trains are either 6 or 8 cars long, 8 cars if you're lucky. We would be able to get all those trains up to 10 cars long if we had these revenues to help make those improvements in terms of service and train length. So I hope that gives you a very high-level overview of what the challenges BART is facing going forward, and what BART is trying to do to address those needs. We are currently finalizing what the BART expenditure plan is going to be, taking that to the BART board's consideration in the upcoming months. And as I said before, we would like to work collaboratively with the Contra Costa Transportation Authority on both our revenue measures so that we can keep BART running reliably and increase service frequency and the length of those trains out there. With that, I'm open to any questions you may have.
Wonderful. I already have 2 in the queue, 3 now, 4. I'll write your names down. Don, you're first, and then Dave Hudson, and then I saw Ron Leone and Bob Taylor and Newell Armitage. And Janet. Okay. I think we're going to go around the table.
Well, thank you very much for coming and presenting to us this evening. Appreciate it. So on your first slide, you talked about the number of riders from Contra Costa County. And I just wanted to make sure I understood whether that included all of the stations in Contra Costa County, whether the 26% is the Pittsburgh Bay Point line.
Go ahead one more time.
Okay, so in your slide 2, you talked about BART in Contra Costa County. And I wanted to make sure I understood whether the 26% of BART trips begin or end in the county, whether that included all the stations in the county,
Yes,
including
it
West County.
also
or just-
includes the El Cerrito stations in Richmond.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Dave.
Yeah. What it doesn't count is Pleasanton, Dublin, which gets an awful lot of ridership, me included. And I think I had the same, I just saw this very similar story from Gail and Karen Basting. What has me concerned is when you put the Hayward maintenance in there as one of the top three, and there's no discussion about you're going to increase the ridership, you're going to increase the efficiency of the trains, but there's nothing about where the people get off. I think it was Newell that brought it up a couple of years ago. This is a San Francisco commute instrument, but even worse, it's an Embarcadero. I mean, everybody gets off at half the people on the train get off at Embarcadero, and I sit there watching them all waiting to get on an escalator that I hope works, and it's only going to get much worse with Transbay as I look at MTC moves in, and that's a small one, but a 100-story building. Is there any way, if we had a board member here, that we could discuss San Francisco's responsibility, in my opinion, in their tax bill to do something about that number one destination on BART? How do you improve that mess before you improve everything else on the line?
Well, we have a sort of a phased approach to try to address the situation you discussed. We actually have it at 2 stations downtown. It's the Embarcadero station and the Montgomery station. We have worked to come up with a concept to basically put an additional set of platforms down there and additional vertical capacity, but those are very expensive. We also are talking about doing things in the interim, like maybe platform doors, like you see at airports, so that we can actually have more people on the platform and it feel like a safer environment. But your point is well taken. San Francisco is the main destination for most of the BART riders out there, and we are trying to work with San Francisco to get them to put in their fair share for the improvements necessary. The developer impact fees, the program that they're trying to implement, we feel there is a very logical nexus between the fees that they pay and making capacity improvements on BART. So point well taken. We are working with San Francisco to try to get money from them, but it's going to take a region to sort of solve the problems that BART is facing.
Okay. Next is Ron Leone, followed by Bob Taylor.
A couple questions. Wanted to know when do you anticipate the decision being made on whether or not you move towards this bond measure?
There's a committee that's just starting to work on it. I would expect it not to happen until the end of this calendar year. Yeah.
Okay.
And there will be a discussion at the next board meeting about this bond measure and some of the polling results that we've been seeing.
And since you were talking about being a shortfall in your CIP budget, have you thought about increasing what you're requesting instead of a $3 billion, perhaps go to a $4 or $4.5 billion bond?
At this point, we've only been polling a $3 billion and a $1.5 billion program. That would be up to the board about what bond level they want to put out there for the voters. I would note that when we had the earthquake bond a few years back, it was over $1 billion, and it failed to garner enough of support. But when we reduced it below $1 billion, we were able to garner the support necessary, and that's why we have the earthquake safety program today.
Okay, and as a side note, I'm assuming that the projects to do the improvements at the Concord station is not involved in this. That's separate. Okay, good. I just checking.
Concord Station is already funded, right?
Okay, great. And one last thing. I'm sorry to. I was just wondering out of curiosity, and you may not have it on the top of your head. You could talk to me later about it. But I was just wondering. I know your focus has been on the CIP budget, but I'm wondering. You have a lot of employees, and there's an employee cost to all of this too. And I'm wondering, you didn't have anything mentioned about that, about how much that costs the system.
So the BART operating budget, I talked a lot about the capital budget here, is about $800 or $700 million a year. About 75% of that cost is employees, labor, and benefits. And it is the It is a very large item, but as I try to point out, we make very substantial contributions from our operating funds to capital programs. This is something that I know of no other transit agency in the country doing. Over $500 million over the last 10 years going from our operating budget into the capital budget. In most agencies, all operating funds go to pay for operating costs. And we take a lot of that to go into our capital program because the capital plan is really goes hand in hand with the operations that we put out there.
Thanks.
Okay. Bob, followed by Newell.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for showing up. I guess the questions I have, I think you painted a very gloomy picture of BART. And the gloomy part is probably the unknown, because I think there's a lot of unknowns. And I guess, and Gail will probably help me with this, you said you don't have date certain yet, so when would be the last time you would know that there's got to be a deadline? Do you have a clue? Because you're going to have a lot of people listening to when that clue is.
I'm not a political expert of when is the last final date that we have to turn something into the county clerk. But as Gail said, I think we're going to be making the decision, either late this year or early next year.
Right, we don't have a date. I don't think it's really dependent so much on when we have to get it into the clerk, but we have a lot of outreach to do if we're going to do a bond measure. So the sooner we can get going on it, the more we can inform the voters of the issues.
No, well, yeah, I go that route. And is this 2/3?
Yes.
So it's 2/3, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess as BART should be very well aware of, is there's probably going to be, 2016 could be loaded with asking for money. And there's probably only going to be X amount of money. The pie is only so big. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I would like to ask, has there been an incident when you're going to ask for how much percentage?
We're going to ask for how much?
Sure.
That will be the board's decision on how much we ask for.
No, I'm talking about percentage. What are you asking for, Gail?
You mean from you?
No, not from me, but
From CCTA?
no. What are we asking for that we need to try to come up with? You're saying
Oh.
$4 billion.
Oh, okay.
You got,
We had a meeting with Randy, and I'm bringing you in now, and Julie, because we are concerned, as you all are concerned, about competing measures. And so we talked about the fact that we could ask for some things like cars that we can't do in our bond measure, and maybe there are things that we can ask for you that would take the pressure off of your bond measure. So that discussion is going on right now. In terms of the percentage, we didn't come up with that, but the general manager optimistically said she would like $300,000 to $500,000.
That's all? You got it. 3 to 500,000, you're done.
Oh, no, million.
All in favor? Second?
Radio will sign up for that right away.
The brain just doesn't want to go there,
No,
does
it
it,
doesn't
Gail?
want to go there. At least I didn't say billion.
That's right.
You didn't say millions either.
my final, and this isn't really a question, but it is a comment. I would caution both agencies for the fact that we're going out for the same dollars. We have to be real cognizant of. We don't want to shoot the other one in the head, and then we get shot in the head, and pretty soon we all fall down.
Okay.
And it's not, so I'm quite not sure how you would merge the two agencies, but I think that's going to be quite a challenge. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Bob. Newell and then Janet.
Thank you. And I also thank you for being here. It's actually a very good report. But a little bit what Dave said, almost 40% of the population that's in the BART area, has been in there since 1959 or 60, is Contra Costa County. 26% of the riders are Contra Costa County. of the sales tax contributors, 48% of the sales tax comes from here. So you have contributors at 48% of revenue, population at 40%, and users at 26%. We're donors. So keep that in mind and think about it this way, that I think from my seat, and I represent all the cities, selfishly all the cities would say, if BART is going to go for a bond measure, no matter what your restrictions are, go for the monies that you need, but you can't live in ours as well. Because otherwise the voters are going to see, well, wait a minute, we're voting for BART, and we're voting for BART. So we're competing against ourselves, and you would be too. So if you are, and I think what Mr. Taylor is saying, if you're going to do this, we need to know this, and we need to know it now. And waiting to the last minute isn't going to do it. But I think from the cities, and again, we're donors. We're large donors to a system that moves people largely back and forth to San Francisco. That to see us on the same ballot and have BART and both, I don't think that works. And nobody wants to really say it. I'm going to say it first on behalf of all the cities. It doesn't work. It just doesn't. Politically, it doesn't work. Electorate, it doesn't work. If we polled that, ours is dead. Ours will be DOA. If it says, by the way, would you vote for Contra Costa Transportation half-cents sales tax, an additional one, if it includes BART? And by the way, would you knowingly do that if BART has its own measure on there? And the answer is the common sense, no. I mean, you know how hard it was to get yours passed in the past. Everything, the stars have to be aligned perfectly. Ours needs even more perfect alignment. Our survey tells us that we need to do everything absolutely perfect. And if there's anything that puts a chink in that chain, you know what, it's not going to happen. So I'm just saying, I think out loud, I think you need to make a decision, and we need to make our decision to react to that. But the idea, if we're going to have two, I just don't see it working. I don't see the polling even going to help us in any way. And you might not like that answer, but also keep in mind, we're the big donor. I mean, 48%, we're getting pretty high to half. And our population is going to grow a little bit, our income is, but our ridership isn't going to grow that much more because there's no capacity. So, long comment, but I think you ought to, the board ought to take that into consideration. Now, if we were on alternate years, I don't have any problem, and I think what we've done in the past makes sense. But in fact, we are competing, and we don't want to say it, but we are competing, and it's just not going to work. So when you have your meetings, think about it, because we're behind the door thinking about that too. How are we going to do this? And ours is, a pretty tough shot to do it. So anyway, I hope you take that in consideration.
So let me verify with my staffs and BART folks. If I'm not mistaken, we both went out together in 2004, and we both passed rather resoundingly. And well, it wasn't that tiny, but we have done some polling toward that, and we actually look pretty good going out together. So yes, it has to be balanced, and we have to be able to show what one can do when the other can't, and how we're able to balance all of that. But
Just an opinion.
I understand. I understand. I understand. But we've done it once before, and we both passed. So that's the other point. Okay, Janet, and then Chris.
Thank you. Good to see you, Carter. The questions I had were in terms of what's being talked about, a little bit different. I'm going back to your presentation, and I hear you talking about Contra Costa as though it were one line, and it makes it really confusing for me to understand what it is you're talking about, because I live in the part of Contra Costa that a lot of people don't recognize as being in Contra Costa County. They not just in this regard. Oh no, I'm talking about, like, let's say PTA people. They really say, they do say this to me, you're in Contra Costa, and so it's kind of confusing what you're talking about, whether or not you're talking about the line that goes from this area to San Francisco, or you're talking about all stations that originate, that are located physically in Contra Costa? Because in fact, there are several different paths, and like you were talking about the number of cars on a train, and you said 5. You could get as low as 5, and I was thinking, I think when I came out here, I was on a 3-car train leaving my point of origin. So, so these things don't. So as it gets really confusing to me in what you're saying, with all of those things, because I know them to be different. And the thing that was also confusing to me is if 24% of the trips originate in Contra Costa, and that's all stations,
I think it was 26%.
26.
20-something percent.
Yeah.
Okay. There are currently 3 sort of, with, I guess, San Mateo a little more, stations. Aren't we not? I don't see how we're a donor. Is it the dollars? Dollars, okay.
It's on the sales tax.
But it isn't in terms of the riders, right?
No, you're about 26% of our ridership.
So we're lower rather than bigger. Or how are you counting it? That's what I didn't quite really understand.
So if you're curious, I have the sales tax numbers from the 3 counties that BART collects. We get about $233 million on an average annual basis. 46% of that, $106 million, comes from Alameda County. $69 million comes from San Francisco County. And 24%, or $56 million, comes from Contra Costa County. So 24% of our sales tax is about equal to the 26% of
And
the
then
ridership.
riders is all riders at all hours?
Yes. Interesting, just I'm full of facts tonight. We do get some property tax revenue, and this I think is good news for you guys. We get about $34 million, really a pretty small part of our operating budget. 37% or $12 million comes from Alameda County, 33% comes from San Francisco, and 30% comes from Contra Costa County. So you do put a little bit more property tax than the ridership that you take on the trip.
It would be helpful to have those, if you would send those to our staff and they can distribute that to us later. Okay. Are you done, Janet?
Oh, yes.
Okay, thank you. Go to Chris and then to Don and Ron. Did you want back in line? Okay.
And then me, please.
Okay.
Thanks. Carter, this is probably a question outside your expertise, but I always ask this whenever it's a bond issue. Bonds are going to get paid back. So has anybody calculated an annual cost per household or per something to pay back these bonds? If it were a parcel tax, would it be $50 a year, $100 a year? If it were a sales tax, would it be another 0.25%? Would it be another 1/8%? Have you guys done any of those calculations?
We have started to do those calculations working with a financial analysis, and I guess I would just say I need to share that with the board of directors before I share it with you first.
Okay. We'll look forward to seeing that information too. Very good. Don and then Ron.
Okay. Well, thanks again. I imagine one of the questions you'll get tomorrow when you go back to the office is, well, how much money is Contra Costa willing to put in compared to that $300 to $500 million estimate? So I would imagine that BART staff have been engaged in the conversations that are going on with the various RTPCs, and I know none of those numbers are finalized yet, but from your perspective, what are you hearing?
I'm hearing less than what we would like to get.
Okay.
And to be truthful,
What?
we were not here tonight to try to pin you down on a number.
No, I
We would
understand
really
that.
like to ask that you encourage your staff to work collaboratively with us on the two measures together.
Right. And I'm just wondering whether what you're hearing is like 1/10 of what your number was, or it's 50% or something, or 80% or whatever. But and again, it's all preliminary. Clearly, it's less. And as an opinion, I will say, I don't know how the voters will respond to a measure together, but I do know that when we went out and polled about what people thought was important, better BART service was high on that list. And so it strikes me that we ought to think about a way for an opportunity to piggyback with BART and have us both benefit from BART things, as opposed to assuming off at the starting basis that we can't make it work. So I would just start from a different perspective.
Okay, Ron and then Karen.
I was wondering if Bart was looking into other counties doing other bond measures for next year as well.
We don't have the authority to go to the other counties who are not members of the BART district,
Oh, okay,
and that includes San Mateo and Santa Clara County.
okay. And then I'll just pass it on to Karen, because Karen? Oh, you weren't going to? Oh, you weren't going to bring that up? Okay, I'll leave it alone then.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Now Karen, then Dave.
No, and I want to piggyback on what Ron's saying. And I haven't paid as much attention, this is more to Gail than to you, Mr. Mao, as far as what San Mateo and Santa Clara participate, because I remember when Bart was going to the airport, San Mateo did a buy-in, and I got that, and all that stuff. But I heard you mention, and I thought I recalled that Bart wants to extend down to Santa Clara County, and when you're talking property taxes, at what point are San Mateo and Santa Clara going to start participating? Because from where I sit and representing, as we all do, I mean, we're paying for BART. It took forever to get, and this isn't a criticism, it's just I get the financial impacts for eBART, and I know West BART, and what have you. And then when you're going to do public outreach and education, if I was somebody who already lived here and already paying half sales tax, and then being asked again to this, and San Mateo and Santa Clara counties aren't doing their fair share there, I'm concerned about that. I don't know the answer to it. I don't know the.
Can I answer?
Good, go ahead.
I can answer the Santa Clara part. You probably need to do the airport part. But Santa Clara passed two different sales taxes, one for operating and one for construction. So you can consider us like a contractor. They are contracting with BART to run their service. They are paying 100% of the piece.
Okay, that's
and
good to
then
know.
we did an analysis and said, well, how are they impacting the core system? And they're paying for some of that also.
But not out of property tax, like
No,
the 1% of the.
Out
so-
of their sales taxes.
Right. No, I get that, but
Yeah.
we're paying sales tax and the 1% of the 1% or whatever. Anyway, and thank you. I appreciate it. I just wanted to.
And the airport,
I get
Let me
San
answer.
Mateo.
Yeah.
I mean, you got a huge county and it goes only this one place. I get why, but at some point, don't you have to go off that spur to go on down to Santa Clara? Or are you going around the other
No,
way?
we're extending to Warm Springs and Fremont, and then they're going to connect up with us and pay for that last little segment in Contra Costa County to connect up with us. So the peninsula doesn't want us, so we're ending at the airport.
No, and that's fine, and I get that. It's just, you and I know the public doesn't look at it. But Newell's talking about competing measures. The only reason I'm bringing it up again, I know it's a broken record here, but I'm hearing out in the public that people who are in decision-making roles have not heard that message, and the county is still considering a sales tax measure too. So there's a lot to look forward to in 2016.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and let Carter talk about the airport because I think that's something that most people don't understand either.
All right, so San Mateo County obviously is not part of the BART district. So there was what we call a buy-in that San Mateo County had to pay, and they basically paid a very large share of the extension of the system out to Dublin Pleasanton and the extension of the system out to Pittsburgh Bay Point. They also had to pay for much of the SFO extension itself, and then they had to basically pay for the operating expenses associated with San Mateo, that extension down to the airport. A few years back, we did terminate our agreement with San Mateo County because the line was not making money and they did not have enough money to pay for the operations. At that time, BART, MTC, and Samtrans negotiated what we call a divorce agreement. And basically, they gave us a lump sum of money. MTC put in a lump sum of money, and BART took over operations of that service. Ironically, once Samtrans got out of the agreement, that line down to the airport started to make money. So the commitment that San Mateo County was going to have to pay in was no longer there. So actually that line is now actually, based on the formula that we worked out in the divorce agreement, is generating money that goes into the BART operating budget.
And I say great and good job, and that's wonderful. There's just, we all know this, the public, they don't get that. They don't get and it's very frustrating. I know it's frustrating to you, so.
I
It's
agree. It's very hard to explain because people don't have, the time to listen to the whole
Or
explanation.
they don't want to. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And that was one of the comments we made in our meeting, is that BART needs to tell their story better and get that word out so that the public does understand. And with that, I will interject a question before I go back to Dave, and that is, what is your fare box recovery percentage? We know
70.
that our bus system is somewhere around 20,
70%.
70% is our bus system?
That's one of the things I was going to say.
No.
16 is bus, 70 is BART.
If you guys are
It's
70,
16 to 17%.
No, 70 is BART.
Yeah, I
Okay.
you don't need to answer for him. I
Oh.
was comparing it
So
to
he's absolutely right.
things like our bus system recover about 16, 17%. And BART is recovering exactly,
If you want the exact number, I can look it up.
it's like 68, 70, somewhere around
It's
there.
about 70%.
Yeah, it's a lot. So they're doing a good job. I mean, for public transit, that's a pretty impressive record. Okay, Dave?
You just took away half. No.
I'm sorry.
I was going to point out that you're not going to ignore a transit company that's got 70% recovery. You're not going to worry about paying back the bond when they have 70%. And most of us sit on the board for any kind of transit. They're happy to get 16. I don't think you're going to see San Mateo expansions or anything to do with BART because they're all in on the electrification of Caltrans up and down the peninsula. And that doubles the amount of stops they can have, getting rid of that diesel modular unit. I think you have a natural with San Francisco if you can get them to go out 2018, to go out in 2018. Doing an election in 2016, I mentioned something to Gail. I'd take a look at other things that are on the ballot besides bond measures, because you got some people that have a target on your back, and they're coming up in 2016. They're not going to let it go. The story that you've got to get out, and it's the first time I've heard it, is when you're taking operating money to go to capital. And most people think it's the other way around. And speaking for somebody who's never had the highest paid city manager in the state, once something gets going, you're dead. You can't reconvince people. I do believe that we're going to have to come up with some kind of a number for whether we call it transit. I'd like to see us even looking at the electrification of what we're talking about, the Hercules, because we don't even know if we can get a stop at Hercules, and we're talking about fixing this thing up. But I do believe when we get into it, it'll be a number simply because we've got a staff executive director. You give him a little bit, he gets a lot more. And if nothing else, it would help improve the things that you're talking about in Contra Costa. And I believe it's much higher than 26 because, to me, the Tri-Valley is Contra Costa, and those two stops get a lot of people. But what it's going to be, I don't know. I think if you don't have something where people get off in San Francisco and they can see that it's the total package, you're going to be fighting another uphill battle. So I'd really focus on, when you're talking to San Francisco, of what they're going to do at Embarcadero to make it something. Well, it's not going to be the Trans Bay terminal, but I mean, what can you do to improve that? Because it's a mess.
Thank you, Dave. Bob Taylor and then Gail.
Judy, just for on the record, and you'll state it much better than I will, that we have not made a decision. So you want to?
No, we have not
would
made
you,
a
just
decision
for the-
to go forward. No, we have not.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're not putting out a message.
No, we have not made any decision on whether we will be on the ballot in 2016. We are still exploring, just as BART is. All right, Gail?
Well, this is kind of after the fact. Maybe I don't even need to say it because Dave did. We are one of the systems that do put money from our operating into the capital, and the $45 million a year that we put in for the cars are one of the ways that we're paying for the cars out of our operating money. So our riders are really carrying a lot of the system on their backs. And thank goodness.
That's right. That's right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Carter. You did a great job, and I want to just say we will continue our discussions with Bart on how we can collaborate together and help to balance each other's measures. If either one of us decide to go back out, we'll make sure it's one that's married together well and strongly so that we can benefit each other. So thank you, Gail, for bringing this
I know what else I was going to say
Okay.
to Newell, which is Eric Zell did say they were going to try and poll the two measures. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, very good. Thank you so much. So on to item 3.2, which is the development of a transportation sales tax transportation expenditure plan. If we should decide to go forward, we would need a plan. Thank you, Ross.
Ross Chittenden, Deputy Executive Director with the authority. Happy to talk about our efforts to continue that exploration. And these next three items are under the heading of a transportation expenditure plan, but obviously the last discussion is linked in here. So really appreciate that, and do look forward to working with Bart as we go forward. The first couple of items on the agenda here are rather administrative. And then once we go through those, Lindsay has an item that I think will be very informative, getting to some of the topic that we've discussed in the last item about how do we engage the public on finding their wishes, wants, and needs in Contra Costa. And obviously, the discussion of BART will be in that. So the first item that I'm taking up here is 3.21, and this is related to adding new members to the Expenditure Plan Advisory Committee. Over the last couple of meetings, we've chartered and initiated that committee and appointed some members. At our meeting last month, the board asked staff to add a business park category to that list of members, and we've done that, and we've recruited Alex Marin Sr. and Christian Trubridge from Sunset Development to fill that role. They've agreed to serve on the EPAC. That fills 27 member categories. We are still working to identify a member to represent public health. We've gone through a few folks with American Lung Association and others, and we do have a potential member, not yet ready to bring that forward for your appointment, but we will continue to work on a public health representative. I do think that a number of the members in the EPAC represent active transportation, so there's some elements of health in there, but we'll continue to work on that specific category. So with that, I ask that you approve staff's recommendation to add Alex Marin Sr. and Christian Trubridge as his alternate to the EPAC.
Second.
Motion by Hudson, second by Arnerich. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? That carries unanimously by those present. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Moving on to item 3.2.2, this is an information item. It is we're transmitting to you a copy of the EPAC minutes from their first meeting in June. You've asked that we bring this forward to you so that you can see what their discussions are. So it is included as an information item, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about that. We've also attached for your information additional information on their future meeting dates. That's listed on page 7 of your staff report in attachment B. The plan is that we'll continue to meet over at the Embassy Suites next door. The meeting in July 2nd, I believe, or July 1st, had the room almost full. So we do have a lot of interest in folks participating, and we are getting the majority of the EPAC members to attend each of those meetings. In attachment C, we've taken that schedule and outlined the agenda topics that we forecast to be covered in each of those meetings. Obviously, that's subject to change with our facilitator and the EPAC members themselves. So the next meeting is scheduled for August 10th. The EPAC was very interested in receiving some presentations from a number of perspectives, even outside of the county. So we're currently lined up for a 3.5-hour meeting with about 11 presentations. So we're going to continue to work on finding a way to streamline that so we can get the EPAC time so they can start their deliberations. Included on that agenda, and we're still trying to work on the format, is presentations on the RTPC's input that we're asking for on July 4th. And also involving the transit operators to come in and make a presentation, and PMA, representative of PMA is asked to be on the agenda as well. So we'll go through that kind of an input into the EPAC, queue them up for the next several meetings. So outlined on page 2 of attachment C, we have 2 meetings in September and a meeting in October, or 2 meetings in October, and that's really where we expect them to roll up their sleeves and get into the detailed discussions of what they see as the priorities for the projects and programs, and I certainly expect they're going to get into some discussion on some of the policy considerations that we need. And then we're asking them to deliver to the authority on by October 26th their recommendations. So they'll be getting input from what the RTPCs have submitted. They'll be getting input from transit and the cities. So they'll use that and choose to use that as to their, as much as they choose to use it. Hopefully they'll consider that, as well as some input that Martin is providing with the project evaluations that he's talked about at the last meeting. Before we move on this topic, I just did want to state for the board that I learned at a session over at Danville the other day that there's perception, and it's not just from that area, I've heard it from several areas, there's a perception that we have EPAC kind of driving the process. So it's a communication that I need to work on, and we all need to work on. And you'll see a little bit of this in a presentation coming next. We're accepting input through 3 main channels. There'll be additional channels. So those channels are the RTPCs and the member jurisdictions that belong to the RTPCs. So that's one. The EPAC, and then the public, the direct public. And you'll hear a presentation from Lindsay next on our engagement with the public. So we will work, and you can expect to receive from us prior to our meeting in September some talking points and graphics that we're going to ask you to help reinforce that this is a decision that will be made by this body with input from RTPCs, EPAC, public, other channels that we accept, and we're really trying to keep it balanced. We're not putting EPAC at a standing that's higher than the others. We're really accepting input from everyone. So I will take that. Thank you, Newell and others, for that's feedback so that we can beef up our communication on how we're working the process. So with that, I'll end my report. It's an information item. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to address that.
Any questions for Ross? Seeing none. Lindsay, you're up. Thanks, Ross.
Thank you.
Chair Pierce, can you turn off your mic real quick? See if we can, okay.
Give me one moment. I'm just going to flip this around so I can actually move the slides forward. Good evening, commissioners. I'll try to keep this short and sweet because I'm sure that all of you diligently read your staff reports and you already know what I'm going to say. So I'm here to talk to you tonight about a plan to engage the public directly in our transportation expenditure plan development process. So I want to just take a quick moment to reflect back on what we've done as part of the countywide comprehensive transportation plan process last year. We engaged in a big public outreach effort, and we asked the public directly for bright ideas in a variety of ways, and that this is just a quick sample of kind of what the online tool looked like, which was one of the methods of input and communication that we got. And we got quite a lot of input and a really long wish list for the public. And part of what we heard from that process is leading into the fact that we're looking at developing an expenditure plan. We had quite a bit of participation, almost 7,000 people kind of chimed in directly to tell you and us as an agency what they wanted to see. So what's next? We had this wonderful public outreach effort, and we want to continue that dialogue with the public. And some of our goals kind of for the remainder of this calendar year, which is what this plan covers, is to continue our engagement with the folks who have been part of the countywide transportation plan process, to spend a little more time kind of educating the public about the process and the different ways that they can participate, and to really expand our efforts and reach out to more members of the community and continue to try to get direct input from as many corners of the county as possible. And I have my own personal challenge, which is I want to double the number of direct participants. So when I come back to you later this year to present my results, you can hold me to that. So a quick overview of the plan that was in your staff report. This one has a little bit prettier pictures. We're planning to continue online engagement. This was a really popular method with folks, and we'd like to do an update to the KeepContraCostaMoving.net site. And one of the things that we are playing around with is a way for folks to let us know their priorities from that giant wish list of projects by investing little cocoa coins into different categories and telling us what they think, and having kind of like a real-time dashboard that can serve as a resource to you as members of this board and other stakeholders to see kind of what items and broad categories the public is really interested in potentially investing in. And one of the things that we're looking at doing this time that we didn't do last time was having a mobile-friendly version. So when you have some sort of interactive tool where people can do things, it really works best on like a tablet or a desktop-sized computer. And so last time, a lot of folks who went to the tool from their phone, including some of you, I've got some great feedback, said it was really hard to use. So we are creating specifically a mobile version for this time around so that it will be really easy for folks who tend to do everything on their phone to be able to provide us with input directly in a way that's easiest for them. We're also looking at ways to make sure that the public knows about all the opportunities to comment. And this is what Ross just kind of referred to, this little graphic up here, that we want to make sure that the regional transportation planning committees and you as a board hear directly from the public. And we want to be sure they know about all the opportunities to comment in person at all of the venues, because I think personally, you want to hear their voice directly. You don't want me to tell you what they have to say. You want to hear it directly from them. One of the things that we are looking at doing is hosting a series of telephone town halls, really to kind of facilitate a conversation between CCTAs and the RTPCs and the public. And I tease Martin all the time about using too many acronyms, so I should really be saying Regional Transportation Planning Committees. And this is one of the items, as noted in your staff report, that is not covered currently under the Gray Bowen Scott contract, and we would have to potentially do an amendment to their contract in the future to be able to do these. But during the last round of public outreach during the countywide transportation plan process, this proved to be a really wonderful way to reach a lot of people at once. In terms of staff time preparation, it took about the same number of hours to prepare for as an in-person public workshop, but our in-person public workshops averaged 25 to 40 people, and the telephone town hall had 1,300 participants. And so the vision for this is really to kind of team up with CCTA and the Regional Transportation Planning Committees, host these telephone town halls jointly, and really use it as a tool for the I'm going to use the acronym now because it's such a long phrase to say over and over again, RTPCs, to test out some of the ideas you're putting before the public. The telephone town halls have some features where you can kind of do some polling on the call and let people choose what they like better than something else. We could take caller comments. We can do a question and answer session. There are a lot of options there. And I think that this is a really wonderful format to get direct public input. We're also planning to do a printed survey. There are folks who don't necessarily want to be in the digital world all the time or at all, and their input is certainly as valuable as everybody else's, and we want to make sure that we have an opportunity for them if they aren't able to attend something in person or don't want to spend the time in a town hall to also give us their feedback. We did printed surveys last time, and I should note that we have been doing our materials in multiple languages, in both English and Spanish, for all the different items that I'm talking about here. And our intention is to do the same for this outreach effort. And so the printed surveys were a great way. Last time we got them into a lot of community centers and senior centers, and they are paid postage back to CCTA. And another thing that we created last time that we're planning to do again this time is a stakeholder toolkit, because you are really our best advocates to the public, and you engage with a wide variety of constituents daily in all of your meetings. And so we're looking at creating a little kit for you, not just of talking points and social media posts and some of the other materials, but we've also been playing around with the idea of kind of creating something really simple and easy for you to carry that's maybe postcard size or business card size, so that you can give them directly to your constituents and encourage them to be part of this process, and it will tell them how to do that. One of the things that I didn't mention in here that's in your staff report is kind of the optional year-end report. And that's something that we have been kicking around. CCTA does so much good work throughout the year, and we thought that there might be a really nice opportunity at the end of this calendar year to kind of reach out and inform the public about all of the stuff we've done, kind of our milestones and accomplishments, and also remind them, you know, at that point that there is a process going on and there's still room for them to be involved should we decide to continue to move forward. And that's listed as optional because we know there are a lot of decisions to be made between now and the end of the year, and we don't want to make any assumptions. And that's certainly something, you know, as we near the end of the year, if we want to move forward with that, we can bring that item back to you for your approval. I should also note that while I would love to just take all of this stuff and run with it, there is an ad hoc committee who does get to see each of these elements and review them. So there is some review of each of these items before they go out to the public. And so with that, and in the interest of your time, I'm happy to take any questions or comments or concerns.
Questions, comments, Karen?
Thank you. And Lindsay, it's a great tool. I know we used it last time, and I support it. The one thing you didn't talk about was the cost. So where are we getting the money? I am making an assumption. I folded both. You gave us the cost of $475,500 for everything, excluding the annual report, and then the annual report would be another $175,000. So we're talking $650,500. Where's it coming from?
So all of the items that I've presented tonight, with the exception of the cost for hosting the telephone town halls and that year-end report, the $175,000, are currently covered in the Graybo and Scott contract. Those dollars are already in that contract, and they are available to do this effort. So they're existing dollars in a contract that are there. The telephone town hall and this optional item.
It comes up to $447,500.
Correct. And that is not currently covered. So one of the options before the board is we certainly will not schedule any of these or host any of these until there are dollars available to do so. So one option is for the board to approve this budget as it is to do all of the items with the exception of the telephone town hall and the year-end report. And we can come back and ask you for those dollars in a future amendment to the Graybo and Scott contract, or you can approve the entire package contingent upon a future amendment to the Graybo and Scott
No,
contract.
I get the amendment part. Where's the money coming from? What pot are we going out to?
I believe, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, that this is part of the countywide transportation plan dollars?
Yes, so we will be back in September. We've mentioned this a few times, and we're still trying to hone into a final number. So Lindsay's talking about a communication element. There'll be additional costs that you see above that. And yeah, we are currently funding it out of our federal planning dollars. So I know we have a discussion with staff, including Rainey Carlton, the next week to look at how we fully fund this effort. So we'll be bringing that back in September.
And should it be approved? You want the year-end report would be by, I see it says through December 2015. Does that give staff enough time to put this all together?
In all honesty, because there's so much mail in December, the year-end report probably wouldn't be issued until
No, I get that,
January.
but
We
the
would be
rest-
creating it before the end of the year. That's why it's in here.
I'm talking about the town halls. I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry. The town halls, we could definitely do in the month of October, and that would be plenty of time for that feedback and input to come back to this body.
Thank you.
Newell?
Lindsay, first of all, thank you. You do a wonderful job. It's a pleasure to have you on board. And I think our engagement is 24/7, regardless if we're looking at a new expenditure plan. It's important that we listen, we tell people what we're doing, because clearly we found out not everybody knows who we are. So I think that's good. The only concern I have is on our outreach of, and I give you the background. My mother was one of those who helped Lewis Harris, Gallup, every major poll, started a group of women, and they did surveys. They did every major research on cholesterol and stuff. And I used to help her do the statistics. But I would listen in on how they would make sure they got to the right people. And one of the things in some of our engagement that I see, and it's just a perception, that a lot of the people that we hear from represent a small group of people that we actually serve. So our bicycle coalitions, mostly recreational bicyclers, our commuters that use public transportation as a percentage of who pays our bills and who we are and where most of our money goes. The people in cars, this system is not really easy for them to engage. Because if you look at everything, it's hard to find it says highways. So I guess I'm mostly, unless I'm going to San Francisco, I'm a highway person. Well, I don't know that that's the way that I would label that. So I would just say I think we ought to think cautiously to make sure the voices are, because I think what happened last time, we heard a lot from our public transit users. And so that's why our survey looks, wow, everybody wants public transit. But in fact, you talk to people and they're not using that, nor do they have an interest in using it. So I would just say I think we need to retool that a bit as we go forward to get the automobile users. I know that to some people that's just a sin, but the fact is a majority of our people, and we've invested an overwhelming majority, and we're going to continue to maintain that in some form, new ideas. But I think to make sure we get our data back that's weighted, or that we make sure it's carefully weighted that, yeah, we heard from 90% of the people, but by the way, they all ride BART, which is okay to hear what those concerns are. But we can't use that to sway everything what we're doing. And that happened a little bit last time. So, again, in all of our outreach, those people who are driving cars aren't going online and talk about transportation. They don't engage that way. But if I'm using BART, I look up the schedule, I look at, wow, my FastPass, I look at all those things. So I'm already engaged in the online system and engaged in how do I get from point A to point B? Whereas the majority of people don't do that. They get in the car, I know where I'm going. So I think we got to be very, very cautious going forward to grab that group of people. However it manifests itself, I know there's a lot of creative people, but I think that's our shortfall in the past, and hopefully we can fix that for the future. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? What is the pleasure of the authority?
Move the staff recommendation.
I think I saw Hudson's hand up first. Tatson moved, Hudson seconds. All in favor of the item as staff recommended, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Lindsay. Good job. As usual, great job. Okay, we are on to our regular agenda items. We have a report from the Administration and Projects Committee. And Randy, you are going to handle this one.
Members of the Authority Board, my name is Randy Carlton. I'm the CFO and also the IT guy. This is an action item before you. It's to seek authorization to issue RFP 15-3 for information management technology service provider. That's a long-winded way of saying somebody to keep our systems up and running and current. The scope of services that we're seeking is to meet the authority's existing technical and support needs both currently and in the future as we consider other types of technologies that are available, such as cloud computing, heightened interest in data security, and continuing our look at best practices of how we can network our computers. This was a consent item on APC. There were not any issues or concerns. Executive Director asked me to just make a few comments to help put this into some historical perspective of just how far CCTA has come when it comes to technology. When we look at our particular needs, we're a small organization of 20 employees, but our users, our partners, our board, we all have expectations that we're going to operate at a Fortune 500 level type of capacity when it comes to technology. Well, we simply don't have the funds and the capacity to go out and hire an IT department. So our solution here is to outsource for that level of expertise that will address all of our technology needs. When you think about where we've been 10 years ago, we were filling out forms and driving them over to the county offices to pay our bills, and we're now in a situation where we're doing all that information processing online on a computer using our own financial system and paying those vendors more timely and accurately than ever before. Other examples, we're using video conferencing now with our partners at Caltrans that are located all over the state instead of driving to those locations. We're streaming this meeting, live audio. We have some archive on our website of prior meetings. We're doing much more with social media, and we're a major facilitator in this discussion on autonomous vehicle technology. So we really are at a point in time where we need more help, more technical help. We want to bring in these RFPs, have people assess where we are, where we see ourselves going in the next few years, and then put together a comprehensive plan of how to approach that. So that RFP will give us that fresh look. We're seeking your approval to move forward with issuing it. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, I have a motion from Arnerich and a second from Abelson. That's the one I heard first. No? It was Hudson again. Okay, you're throwing your voice there, Dave. All right. Any further questions or anything? Karen, did you have a question?
I'm just curious, on the RFP, are we going out with an amount, or we're just having them come back telling us what they think it's going to cost?
Yeah, that's a good question. Currently we spend about $60,000 for all of our network administration support, fix and breaks, and we are working with a consultant now to
do a complete inventory of what we have and talk about, our vision. And from that, will be able to give us a budget that we'll have in mind, not necessarily that will not be included in the RFP process, but something that would help us be better informed when we do see these proposals coming in from the different vendors. They'll all have the plan specifications written out exactly the same, so they could all be bidding on the same package. Our expectation is it'll come in about where we are now.
Okay, so it's not going to have a number in it, and I guess having done RFPs, I'm not used to an RFP going out, but without a number. But on the other hand, what I'm hearing you say is we'll have a number by the time the responses come in, and we can better evaluate. If it comes in, let's just say we think it's going to cost 75, and somebody comes in at 150, we may talk to them, but we're not. I don't want to encourage taking the lowest bidder. Having spent the last 2 days dealing with computers, I'm about ready to. So they're worth whatever they're worth, but there'll be an evaluation process. Is what I'm hearing.
Let me be clear. They will have pricing in their proposal. We'll be seeking a flat rate, type of support cost, and it's a professional service, so it's not strictly based on lowest price.
And just for the record, that little grunt that you made was a technical term? Yeah.
Though my colleague, last night I was responding to something from some of our other colleagues in another county that won't be named, and so we decided that we would agree to let a letter go forward, and I was going to hold my nose doing so. And she says, is there an emoji for that? And I said, let's develop one, and then we'll make a bunch of money. So if anybody wants to help me develop an emoji that looks like this as you're voting for something, let me know.
That would not apply to this item, however. So, okay, further comment?
You of ADA and
that's where the buzz is coming from.
Mobile communications, and the distracted driving is on the rise. So
hold on a second, Ralph. We got to get this noise out of the way because we can't hear you.
Okay. Well, I'm simply saying that as a senior citizen, and a lot of seniors, ADA dependent people, who get preference on public transit, because their vision or hearing impaired, and yet mobile communications causes distracted driving, and that is on the rise. So I'm not too keen about using mobile surveys because that will just further increase distracted drivers, and who will be the victims? Us senior citizens and ADA qualified persons. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ralph. I think the item talking about mobile surveys was for people to be able to call in from their home telephone. Or from any device that, as long as they're not moving in a car.
Think of mobility and not mobile.
Yes, exactly. So I think we maybe have isolated the issue with the buzz. It may well be that that's the microphone. Let's test the public's microphone. If you can turn that off again. Okay, we're going to have to